Hello, everyone. I am Ben Johnson, and this is the Perpetual Chess Podcast. Perpetual Chess is a weekly chess interview show where we talk with accomplished chess players, authors, and personalities about their lives, their careers, and how to improve at chess. Perpetual Chess is brought to you through the generosity of its Patreon and PayPal supporters and by Chessable.com. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Perpetual Chess. We have another Adult Improver edition, and we have quite an accomplished young improver joining us this week. Our guest is a 29-year-old mathematics graduate student who's working in finance. He's taken his rating from 1567 to 2027 in less than 2 years. He is based in New York City, so like recent improver guest JJ Lang, up until the coronavirus, he'd been able to take advantage of a robust local chess scene when he's not too busy with work and grad school, which I understand is not all that often, which makes his improvement feats all the more impressive, and we are eager to bring him in and hear all about them. So, Andrew Zinn, how are you?
It's an honor to be here, Ben, and a privilege to get to share some ideas with you. So thank you for having me.
I was thinking more secrets than ideas, if that's okay with you. Are you going to reveal some secrets, Andrew?
Yes, if anyone will want them, absolutely. I'll reveal really many secrets. Sure.
Excellent. Okay, well, before you reveal the secrets, we got to tease people a little bit. So let's just dig into your background a little bit, Andrew. So what little internet sleuthing I was able to do suggested to me that you were maybe one of these people who played chess as a kid and then took some time off and then got back into it. Is that accurate?
That's right. But the kind of chess I played as a kid was, I would say, very different than the chess I'm playing today, or really the way I'm approaching the game today is quite different from how I approached it then. So while they both bear on my ability to play chess and on my improvement, I'm sure, it feels like two very different times. Okay,
and you were in Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Pittsburgh, which had a decent chess scene, among other things, a lovely city. And as a kid, one of the ways I was able to enjoy Pittsburgh is by studying with a grandmaster who lived locally, Alex Shabalov. So
yes, I was going to take that wild guess. Having been a Pittsburgh resident, it could only be one.
Yes, and working with him was hugely beneficial. But as we're going to discuss later, I'm sure, I don't think any teacher can substitute the work that the individual has to put in him or herself.
Yeah, they are not a panacea, although certainly helpful. And I'm curious to hear what you learned from Alex in particular. I lived as I've mentioned to you, I lived in Pittsburgh for a while, and even though he's kind of borderline legend in U.S. chess circles, he keeps a pretty low profile in Pittsburgh. So you didn't hear that much about him. He's not like hanging flyers or anything, and very, very active to this day in the U.S. chess circuit. So not always in Pittsburgh, even when he's based there.
That's right. When I was growing up, he was a very active tournament player and was traveling maybe half the year around the world to exotic chess destinations that I always thought were so cool.
Yeah, exactly. So at what age did you play in Pittsburgh? And then at what age did you retire temporarily?
I began playing chess very young. While my parents are American, I was largely raised by what you could call Soviet godparents, I would almost call them. And so the husband, as a product of the Soviet school system, he wasn't an accomplished chess player, but like probably everyone of his generation in the Soviet Union had some literacy in chess. And at first, he didn't want me to be exposed to the game, fearing that it would dominate my life.
Right.
And
that's a valid concern.
Yes. And it was actually my grandfather who showed me how to play. And I think my family members thought I had a knack for chess, and I seemed to do pretty well for my age. And so I began to play local tournaments.
The Jerry Meyers specials.
Jerry Meyers specials. And
Exactly. Shout out to Jerry if he catches wind of this.
I hope he does. He will remember me. And so thank you, Jerry, for instilling the love of the game.
Okay. And then, so you're a young kid and you're playing. And then at what point did you decide enough was enough for the time being?
Well, nothing at that age was very conscious. That's really a distinguishing factor between this time to chess and then. At that age, I think I viewed everything quite passively, and that was sort of a personal characteristic. I probably felt that I was playing chess not entirely of my own accord. It was just kind of happening. I wouldn't say it was purely to please my family, but there was a very strong feeling. Well, actually, I would say a lack of a strong feeling of agency in what I was doing. And so at that age, I never thought about chess in a very proactive way. I didn't work on chess. I had lessons with a teacher whom I admired very much. And perhaps I could glean some things from what he was telling me. But in a lot of ways, I was quite disengaged at that point in my life. And so I would say I decided to start playing chess about 2 or 3 years ago when I realized that my love of the game was actually my own and wasn't being imposed on me.
Cool. Well, it's an important point you raised, because I think that as someone who's, done scholastic chess teaching, you see that with young kids who are just kind of being led around, from soccer practice to piano lessons to chess, and who knows what they actually like. It's a good point. And I've heard English author and chess teacher Richard James has often, for that reason, advocated that it's better, if you actually want kids to like chess, it's better to introduce them to them when they're older. But that's not necessarily when parents view it as best. And I don't think it's necessarily harmful for younger kids, although it's hard, I think, for younger kids, especially if they don't get knee deep in it right away. It's hard to appreciate the game when you're 6 or 7 years old.
Well, what's publicly available about Magnus Carlsen, I think I recall that he learned to play chess at a pretty early age, but actually didn't start playing any competitive chess until maybe around the age of 8. And his father, who an expert himself, maybe candidate master, I suppose didn't thrust the game upon him or didn't force it on him. Perhaps Magnus was able to acquire his own special love, and so perhaps that is what's best for children. I don't really know the biographies of all the great players.
Yeah, I mean, I do think most tended to start younger, but I mean, 8 is pretty young as it is. But in any event, just to finish this subject and get to bring it forward to what you've done in recent years, now that your passion's ignited. So at what year, Andrew, what was your rating, I guess, was 1567 when you quit?
It was actually lower. It was about 1513. Maybe I played one rated game in about 2014, got up to 1526.
Okay.
So I'd left it off at 1513.
Oh, wow. Okay. My research is shoddy. And and how old were you when you stopped playing as a kid?
Stopped playing, really. I don't want to be contradicted by what's on the record, but
yeah, I hear you. Well, and your best guess.
I think maybe 50. I really slowed down by the time I was 13.
Okay.
And had maybe completely stopped playing by 15.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So now you're in New York a couple years ago and you get back into it. What re-sparked your interest?
Well, it was a long process. After I graduated from the University of Michigan undergraduate, I spent a year and a half back in Pittsburgh, where I was doing academic tutoring and preparing to go to law school, preparing for the LSAT exam. And that was what I might call a very reformative period of my life, where I took the time to rediscover my own interests. It's a lot easier, I think, if you don't have to pay rent. So I would work maybe 20 to 30 hours a week teaching, private tutoring. and the rest of the time was spent studying what I wanted to. And it actually wasn't chess. I took up the piano at that time in my life. Music was another thing that I had done as a kid. And I began playing the piano mainly because I felt like I had unfinished business with classical music. And perhaps I started to feel that was something I really liked. And it still is. But that was actually very important to my later coming back to chess, because it taught me how to develop a skill at an age where that skill usually isn't really developed by a lot of people. And that was very important. I don't think I'd be playing chess this way otherwise.
Interesting. Well, I look forward to sort of hearing more concretely what lessons you took, but let's start with so then what made you decide to transition to more chess?
I went to law school, and there wasn't a Steinway piano in my dorm, so I just
and were you in New York for law school?
Yeah, I did my second 2 years at NYU. I did my first year at Washington University in St. Louis, where there's a vibrant chess scene.
Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah, that probably helped spark my interest in coming back to chess. I went to I almost want to call it the Singfield Museum, but
yeah,
I went to the chess center there and saw a lot of things that interested me, and thought maybe I'd like to play. So
cool. Okay, so let's get down to it. So once you're playing, what's your process like? I mean, you're in law school, so I'm guessing you didn't have like tons of study time. How were you approaching chess?
Right. So the way I approached it was informed by how I studied the piano. So when I studied the piano, I was really concerned about really basic things that a young kid develops when he or she learns a skill that someone coming to it from an adult might not have. So on the piano, we're talking things like trills, things like very nimble fingers, sight reading, being able to play, just being able to manipulate your hands well. It's one thing to be able to read the notes, but I think your improvement in the piano is really going to be capped if you don't build those fundamental building blocks. Like, can I move my fingers? Can I let my wrist relax as I use my hand? So with chess, I thought of it very similarly. I thought in chess, there's a defining skill that strong chess players have, and that is an ability to see the board. You see it in their ability to calculate blindfold. That's obviously a very prominent way you can see that skill exhibited, but also their speed of calculation and the depth to which strong players can calculate. You start to realize that is definitely a limiting factor of someone's growth in chess. So although you mentioned, we talked, I played as a kid. I reached 1500, but I was a very shoddy 1500. Probably I had good intuition about where to put my pieces, but I didn't calculate. I really didn't calculate. So as an adult, I didn't feel that returning to the game, I didn't feel that my calculation was at all decent. I mean, maybe I could see basic things, but to really hold the board in my head, that's what I started to put a priority on. So how to build that? Well, I studied checkmates in 1. Mm-hmm. I studied checkmates in 2, and I studied checkmates in 3. Obviously, the famous Polgar puzzle book.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of people, a lot of 1500s, I might add, or higher, 1600, I don't know, would raise their eyebrows at studying something like checkmate in 1, because someone might say, well, that's just for beginners. You only do that as you're learning how the pieces move. But I don't feel that way. I feel that when I'm looking at a simple puzzle, I'm training myself to view changes occurring on the board. I'm trying to keep the board in my own head in a very fundamental way. And so my practice of chess was not wide-ranging. I wasn't, of course I was interested in openings and look at what books might say or what books existed. I didn't really read opening books getting back into chess. So I was interested in other parts of the game, and I played plenty online, like any chess player probably does. But to train, I trained as I came back to chess in the same way I train now, which is just to be able to see the board. That's a start.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think that it's been a topic, obviously, we've been talking about a lot lately on the podcast, like this idea of just really drilling the basics. But of course, the first question that comes to my mind, Andrew, is were you repeating them, or like, did you just do the Polgar book once, or were you making some sort of effort to repeat or memorize the patterns that you were seeing?
Definitely not memorizing. The main concern was being fully engaged as I was doing it. So I'm taking mate in one because what simpler example exists? I mean, most people who know the rules of chess can solve mates in one. But it wasn't just identifying the right move. It was forcing myself, and it's not a violent process. The word force, we talk about hard work, like work is something painful. It does require a lot of exertion, but it's actually best when it's not too painful. Just to try to ease my mind into imagining what the board looks like when one piece has been moved and now we have a checkmate on the board. To be able to really imagine the configuration of the pieces and how they sit on the 64 squares. I think a lot of chess players, especially beginner intermediate chess players, which is really the only level that I'm at all qualified to speak about, I think a lot of them perhaps overestimate their ability to see the board. I think it's a good challenge to try to even just imagine the 64 squares in your head. So that is what I have put a premium on.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm going to be doing a book recap with a friend of the podcast, Jerry Wells, pretty soon. And we've been reading this book, Blindfold Chess. And it's actually, I mean, a lot of it's about the history of blindfold chess, but they also talk about sort of the method. And it does seem that like when you quiz these like wizards, the guys who do like the, Gureyev, and more historically like Pillsbury and Alekhine and all these guys who do these 40 board simultaneous. They all start with basics. They all say, first start with what color square each square is, just quiz yourself on that. And then just, practice visualizing a piece, a bishop going from F1 to A6, stuff like that. So yeah, what you're saying jibes with what they say in that book. But were you doing anything like, aside from the Polgar book, was there anything else you were doing that helped your visualization?
Oh yeah, I did read some other books. Actually, no other book cover to cover, I would say, but I'm getting close. So another book, which I would have to plug as being a particular favorite and a real gem, is Lasker's Manual of Chess.
I read that one as a kid, and I haven't looked at it since. I still have the descriptive notation version, but I loved it when I was a kid.
Well, what's amazing about Lasker is he can communicate with a player on almost any level. So if you're just learning the rules, he explains the rules in a very beautiful way, in a concise way. And I don't know if his book is well suited to kids. I think his writing style is very mature. I think that he also appeals to a reader who is thinking very actively, which I think probably adults do the most. And Lasker, the reason I like this book so much, in addition to just really admiring the guy, admiring that he could be an accomplished mathematician and a dominant chess player for most of his life, I'm not sure how many other people have accomplished so much. So I am a big fan of his. But other than personal admiration. I think this book packs into 280 pages I'm seeing here. I have it in front of me. So many different parts of the game. And the guy understood chess so well that it doesn't really matter if there are some lines that haven't been computer checked. One, I don't see what it matters if you yourself can't refute the flawed
Right.
analysis. That's one thing. Of course, in openings, it does tend to matter because our opponents are playing with the benefit of some research. And so in openings, you probably want to be somewhat precise. But actually, the opening he goes through many, many openings, and his lines are pretty good. Some of them are real gems. I particularly like the lines he gives against the Scotch defense for Scotch opening for black. He gives really good lines there. And there's this famous book, I guess, Ideas Behind the Openings by
Reuben Fine, right?
Yeah, I never read that book, but I would say that's what this book actually accomplishes in its opening section. It gives you a really strong idea of the strategic aims of both colors in many of the significant openings. And so even his opening discussion, which of course some would argue, oh, it's so dated. Well, yes, these aren't the lines we'll be seeing Caruana play against Magnus, perhaps. Maybe he might play some of them actually, but at the level of, let's say, 1500, I don't see what that much matters. So, and he goes into other parts of the game so beautifully, and it's so concise. I don't see how someone who studies this very thoroughly, I don't see how someone who did that could fail to perhaps become an expert chess player.
Wow. That's a bold statement. But before we follow up on that, I just wanted to throw in the first of a few Patreon mailbag questions from Miguel Arespide, which I think you may have just answered, which is why I'm throwing it in. Mm-hmm. So Miguel had asked what old classic player you like and why that particular player and the best book to read about that player.
Yeah, so of course I like Lasker's manual. He's not the only classic player whom I admire a lot. I admire Richard Reti a great deal, and I have an antique copy of his Masters of the Chessboard.
Wow, we have like the same book collection.
Yeah, and you have to be willing to read descriptive notation for a lot of these. But
yeah, well, I was trying to actually a second ago. I was trying to look up because I had descriptive of both books. I know there's a algebraic version of Masters of the Chessboard that's inexpensive too. I think it's like $12. So great value. I mean, again, the same critiques you mentioned or whatever, not critiques, disclaimers about like, okay, maybe the analysis isn't perfect, but Reti also, as I'm sure you agree, being that you brought it up. I mean, he does a great job explaining the openings. He gives a little bit of color on the players and their historical context. And it's just a nice book to read. And Lasker, I haven't chased down yet if there's an algebraic version, but there is a 21st century edition. So that sounds promising.
That does. I'm reading one of the descriptive ones, but I'm living with it.
Okay. But anyway, sorry to cut you off, but yeah, that's another classic, Richard Reti. Any others to add, or were those your two main go-tos?
Well, I've gone over games. One of the benefits of studying with Shabalov as a kid, and I'm still in touch with him actually, but when we were studying, we often looked at the games of classic players, and I don't want to be too self-deprecating, but in hindsight, I feel like some of that was pearls to the swine. I'm not sure I was fully appreciating.
Yeah.
But I took I took some color. Even so, I took some color from those lessons. So I really loved. Does love really go away? I'm not sure. I love Alekhine or Alekhine.
Right.
I love very much. And his games struck me as something so big. Like it's not my favorite composer, but almost like a Mahler symphony or something, where it's just building and building and building, and it just never seems to stop. And the tension just explodes. And those Alekhine games, of course, I'm not an expert on Alekhine. I mean, really not an expert on anything except my USCF title.
Right.
But his games are magnificent, to be compared with great symphonies, perhaps.
Excellent. So, okay, you've done your reading. How often were you playing when you made this jump?
So, right. I was playing a lot. I was playing probably an average of a game a week, rated game. The Marshall Chess Club, as your New York listeners will know, and as others may have heard of, and that's another great old player, of course, Frank Marshall. But the Marshall Chess Club is great in that when there's no pandemic, you can play. They host probably about 5 nights a week of rated chess, if not 6. I mean, Tuesdays they don't tend to have it. All other days there's some rated play. So for New Yorkers living reasonably close, it's an invaluable opportunity.
Yeah, and that, of course, I mean, shout out to the Marshall. What can I say that hasn't already been said? But I mean, it certainly had poetic, resonance with me growing up in Philly and like starting to go to the Marshall as a teenager. And like, first of all, like the majesty of New York City and the West Village, but also just like that beautiful building and the history. I mean, and the fact that it's still doing well at a time when a lot of chess clubs, unfortunately, find it hard to compete with internet chess. I mean, it's just a special place. But relating to your games, Andrew, so we're going to jump in with the next question since it fits. Since you're playing so much, Giovanni Russo wrote in to ask, he said, do you analyze your games? And if yes, can you please share some insights on how? Engine, no engine? Do you go shallow or deep, the whole game, or a few key moments, lots of notes, or a few key remarks? Do you go through your analysis at a later stage? And if yes, with what frequency?
Well, I think it's really hard to analyze your own games. And I don't mean to say that you shouldn't try, but if you think about it logically or just rationally, during the game, you're exerting yourself almost to your maximum. I mean, really trying to sit there and win. And so to find on your own improvements upon your own play, I don't think is that easy. It's like, am I really a stronger player in analysis than I am over the board? I'm not sure. But none of this is to say that I don't. I'm just saying it's not easy. It's really good to have someone stronger with you to help you analyze, maybe a teacher or a friend. That having been said, I'm sure that putting in the effort to analyze your own games in a really holistic way, and I mean without the engine. Of course, I mean without the engine, because you don't have an engine with you when you're playing. But to analyze the games yourself, it probably would build a lot of strength, and is something that's an area where I kind of feel, and I'm not playing chess now because no one is, but when chess hopefully resumes, I think I'm going to set aside more time for analyzing my own games. Now, the reality, of course, is I put them in the engine. I mean,
yeah, okay, but so you do look at them, but you put them in the engine was generally your approach?
I put them in the engine, and on one hand, it tells me where did I first slip up in the opening, if I did slip up in the opening, and that almost always happens. Some move.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable. I mean, what you say about the importance of having the engine off when you analyze is something that I would say there's some disagreement. Some people say, grandmasters, when I talk to them about it, some say yes, some say no. Jesse Kraai, obviously a vocal proponent of doing it as analog as possible, taking pages of notes on your games and not using an engine. But I think even Jesse Kraai would be okay. Like if you forgot some theory, it's okay to look up the theory. You don't have to bang your head against the wall trying to figure out the theory on your own.
No, of course. Yeah. So with a database is always good, like Lee Chess database or Chessbase. And about the grandmasters who say that, I mean, of course, they're extremely high ranking and brilliant players. But I just wonder how many of them developed their calculation skills with the engine running. I just wonder if it's easy to say once you're already that good that the running engine doesn't bother you much. But I'm not.
It's a good point. And I should say, like, if I were to go and compile what each grandmaster says, it's probably more common for them to say keep the engine off than turn it on, when you're analyzing. But we're talking mostly about adult improvement, and there's everything's a trade-off. So yes, you could. I mean, if you only have a finite number of hours to study per week, say you're someone who's super busy and you've only got, say, 5 hours that you're able to dedicate to chess, like, is it really the best? And you're playing, say,
5
one tournament a month on top of that. So maybe another 5 hours or something, depending on the time control. Yeah. Like, is the best use to spend those whole 5 hours going through the games, like, without an engine? Or is it to, like, split the baby and do some engine analysis, and then you're able to work on the other aspects of your game as well? Like, who knows,
Yeah. And the way like, I'm speaking about ideals, but the way reality played out, I did not sit and do painstaking Butt like work, analyzing my own games. I often just left it to the engine, or I went over it with a stronger player. Often I would try to go over it with a stronger player.
So, but you didn't have a personal coach at this stage of your life?
Well, I have reconnected with Grandmaster Shabalov, and we've had a number of sessions together. At the Marshall, there are many masters who play, and all perhaps with something valid or stimulating to say about a game. And so it's good to have them around. I think an engine or a book, like an opening book. What I said to start was it's really hard to analyze your own games. And that's also what you're saying. To analyze a game that you put your full effort into, and you're a class, 2000 and below, how much are you going to be able to improve upon your play? I come back to that. So it is hard.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the received wisdom about it is because that's what you had to do. Like, when there were no engines, and coaches were harder to come by, and there was no, like, decode chess that you could, like, input your game into, and it spits out an algorithm with, like, actual pros, telling you about the game. Like, it might not be perfect, but it helps. What else were you going to do? Whereas now there's, like, the world is your oyster.
Probably the engine, using the engine is a net good when reviewing chess games for an adult improver.
Yeah, it should have some role, I would think. It's safe to say. Yeah. But okay, so let's try to break down more what you actually did, though. So you're playing a lot, which I think obviously it can't be stressed enough. That's just so important. There's just no substitute for the actual over the board, in my opinion. Like, go to the place, face the person, feel the tension, play the game. And, that in itself is inspiring to go over it. And then you're reading these classics, and you do look at your games, but not, like, insanely intensely. But, like, how many hours a week do you think you were doing chess total on average?
In a perfect night, I would be able to spend 3 hours on chess.
Wow. Even during law school?
I don't have a family.
Yeah.
Again, not every night.
Right.
It would be a perfect night to be able to spend that much.
So, but what do you think on average per week? How many hours per week? Counting playing five games per month or whatever.
Yeah, probably about 10 hours a week. Oh,
okay. Yeah.
Oh, with the playing, no. If we include the playing, maybe I was sinking 15 hours, almost 15 hours into chess.
And it seems like your law school grades were okay, right? You're getting a finance job, or at least you're doing an internship. So it's impressive stuff, Andrew.
Yeah, and I'm studying math now also. So I'm still in graduate school. So
wow.
But but this summer I've been working, so I've been facing the reality of having a pretty demanding job at the same time as being interested in studying chess.
Do you have any sense that you have a facility for chess? Like, do you feel like you pick things up faster than some people, or is it too hard to judge?
As a kid, that was what it seemed like. Standards have really changed, by the way. I was state champion or co-champion of Pennsylvania for K to 6. And I was, I don't know, 13 or 1400. Now to be Pennsylvania state champ at that age, I imagine you have to be at least 2000. And so what seemed good then does not seem as good today.
Yeah. But yeah, as we do with the athletes, though, it's best to compare with your peers from that generation. So
yeah, from my own time. And I'm not an old man yet, so it feels funny saying it, but
right.
From my own time, I was good. I was one of the best players in the state. I was co-champion for my age, I think 2 times. So it went well, and that was without much work, but with lessons, with a great chess mind. But then, why could I improve from 1500 to 2000? I think is just about how dedicated I've been about thinking about chess and the work I put in. I doubt there's any substitute for that.
Yeah. I mean, 10 to 15. I mean, 10 hours a week plus playing. That's a lot, especially while pursuing these advanced degrees.
If I had a family, it wouldn't be happening. I cannot imagine. If I had a child or something, that wouldn't be happening.
Yeah, and being in New York, again, as with JJ Lang, like it's just to be able to play that much is just so huge.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, so Andrew, we're gonna pick this up in a minute, but I want to take a break and hear from our friends at Chessable. So the latest from our friends at Chessable is the Magnus Touch, the Endgame. As you might infer from that, this is an endgame course designed by Magnus Carlsen and his second GM Peter Hein Nielsen, with help from Chessable's IM Christoph Zalecki, aka Chess Explained. It has 158 training positions that they can quiz you on with Chessable's Move Trainer 2.0. Move Trainer, of course, being their proprietary technology that uses spaced repetition to quiz you repeatedly on key positions and make sure that you learn them. So go check that out, as well as their many free offerings, as well as the classic players you can learn from, all on chessable.com. All right, so Andrew, let's try to get a little more granular on your actual study. So on a good night, you say 3 hours a week. Are you kind of like hopping around between activities, or is it just like whatever book you're enjoying? And how regimented are you about like particular modes of study and playing online, as you mentioned you do, as we all do? What's your general approach to that stuff?
I try to be pretty regimented. I try to make sure I'm working excuse me, on a few books at any given time. I mean, obviously not reading them at the same time, but maybe a rotation, kind of like an exercise circuit. So if I were going to the gym, I wouldn't just curl biceps the whole time.
Right.
Yeah. But that said, I definitely lean toward exercises that train my ability to keep the board in my head. And I try to be pretty regimented about it in the same way of, let's say, playing scales in music. So, I mean, I have a friend who is a fine amateur pianist, and the way he practices is he picks up the sheet music of a Beethoven sonata, which is hard. I mean, for an amateur pianist, that's hard. And he'll just work his way through it, and he'll grind and grind. He'll get sounding pretty decent at that sonata. When I practiced piano, I would really focus on scales and the technical work. And I was an adult improver in piano too. So I don't know if this really directly answering the question, but it's a very honest answer.
Okay. So you keep mentioning visualization, and you mentioned the Polgar book. Is there anything else concrete like that you might suggest? Like, are you doing studies? Are you playing blindfold games? Like anything along those lines?
I can talk about some other books I've used in a serious way. So Kotov's Think Like a Grandmaster. So that's a book where people will say, "Oh, you don't listen to what he says. This isn't how grandmasters analyze at the board." But I think that criticism is actually missing the point of what the book's good for. Maybe Kotov thought that people should do that. I don't know if he really did. What I do know is that to read that book, he makes you work for it. I mean,
Yeah.
I read that book without a board. So I try to play through the lines in my head. And sometimes he'll give sequences as long as 30 moves, 30 plus moves. And so I would read Kotov's book, and I would try to in these 20, 10, in these 8, 10, and it's a muscle. You build this up. So you start at the mate in 1. You can see 1 move forward. Then you can do 2. And then all of a sudden you can see a lot of moves ahead. And so, it's no different from going to the gym. So with the Kotov book, I would try to understand the point of every move in the sequence. Like, why is this and the point doesn't have to be some profound thing. I mean, if it were some profound thing, I'd be a GM by now. But
right.
It's the point is like, is my bishop hanging over there? Is there a fork? I mean, maybe you don't miss. Maybe once you practice, you don't miss that pieces are directly hanging, but you can still miss like 1 move tactics when you're doing this blindfold. So people can argue on the chess.com forums about that book not being modern, and you should read, I don't know who, for whatever reason, John Donaldson came. I don't even know who that is.
He's been on the show. He's a great guy, but I think more likely they would say Jakob Aagaard.
They would say Jakob Aagaard, and I've had a peek at those books. Those look really good. The Aagaard books.
So, Andrew, I recently, not in the past year, reread Think Like a Grandmaster and did a podcast about it with cognitive scientist Christopher Chabris. And I definitely get what you're saying. It's a very concrete book. It's kind of shocking how long the lines were. And of course, since I was kind of I had read it as a kid, but I was trying to sort of power through it in order to meet the deadline of doing 1 per month,
right.
1 podcast per month. So I did not visualize it as much, but sort of what I'm inferring from what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's not even so much about which book it is as the way that you're approaching it. The fact that you really aren't just kind of skimping when you go through the variations, that you're consciously not having the chess set in front of you, but working really hard to visualize everything they say. Is that a fair interpretation, Andrew?
That's exactly what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it all comes back, no matter what route you take, it comes back to deliberate practice and how hard you work at the task you do, and not just sort of and active versus passive learning. Okay, and I have one last Patreon question from you, Andrew. Did you have something you wanted to add?
No, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. So this one is, and again, it's kind of tangentially related to what we've already been discussing. It's from Deepankar Ghosh, recent contributor to the show. So thank you, Deepankar, for the support. And he says, "Hi, Andrew. Your jump from 1,500 to 2,000 is in just 2 years is impressive, to say the least. I'm a 31-year-old working professional with a USCF rating around 1850. I can probably spare 30 minutes to 1 hour max every day to work on chess, maybe 1.5 hours on weekends, but I do aspire to hit that 2,000 rating mark. What are your training techniques that you think gave the most improvement for time invested? And particularly, what would you suggest for someone at my age and rating to improve? Looking forward to hearing your insights. Thanks, Deepankar."
I think that's a great question, because soon, even the 10 hours that I think I can spend on chess a week may themselves dwindle for a variety of reasons. So I've thought about this question, and as you say, it's related to what we said. I think it's important to pick a really good book, but good doesn't mean dogmatic. Good doesn't mean perfect. It doesn't mean it was written by a computer or it was written by Siegbert Tarish. I mean, it just means a good book. So and a book, hopefully, with a good bit of analysis and maybe even some exercises. So you take such a book and maybe 30 minutes to 60 minutes a night, you really immerse yourself in it, trying to visualize, trying to understand the purpose of what you're reading. And on the weekend, with those 1.5 hours a day, maybe you go through a game. Maybe I haven't read it yet, but maybe Zurich 53.
Yeah.
That's a book I hope to read at some point. Believe it or not, I do hope to move forward in time with my chess studies. And that's actually something perhaps I should talk about for a moment. But
I was meaning to ask you about that because, I mean, going to a top law school and getting a graduate degree in mathematics, that's heady stuff to begin with. But actually, I mean, the finance world is not known for its lackadaisical work schedule. So, it'll be, I hope you're able to keep grinding.
Well, I think that an answer to that question is I could be working 14 hours a day and I still believe I could. Now, again, this is assuming no family. Once you have a family, maybe, I don't know, maybe it shouldn't be playing. I don't.
It really does change everything.
But with no family, even if I were working 14 hours a day, and some days I do. I mean, at this summer job, there have been days like that. I could still make time for 30 minutes of a good book. So I've never been so busy in life that I couldn't read a little book. And then it becomes a question of, if you read a little book, are you going to read it passively? Are you going to just want to take it in? Or are you coming at it? Are you going to really engage? And so the asker of this question, I'm sure he already knows his own answer, that if he engages in his materials meaningfully, if he does it for 30 minutes a day and an hour or two on the weekends, I have no doubt that he'll pass me up soon enough.
Nice. Yeah. And it sounds like you guys are in a pretty similar life situation. I mean, he's a couple years older than you, but so where does internet chess, I mean, okay, now it's the middle of the pandemic, so that changes things. But before the pandemic, were you playing Blitz online? Were you playing slower games? And does that count as your chess time? These are the questions we all wrestle with.
Right. It would come in fits and starts. There'd be times, and probably corresponding to the amount of stress I was under in my life, like online chess can really be escapist. I mean,
it really can. As I was telling you before we started recording, I've had a rough couple of days, and chess just has this amazing ability to filter out the rest of the world.
Yeah. So it's its own little world. Online chess, I try to play less. I have an account on Lichess. That's just my name. And a close friend of mine who's a master, an FM, he and I kind of agreed that we would take a break from online chess. So we did something very silly, but completely rounded off our rating. So on Lichess, my Blitz rating is exactly 2100, and my rapid rating is exactly 2300. And so kind of I can't, if I start to play, I'll disturb the harmony of those.
Right. Nice.
So my answer to online chess is I'm trying my best not to play it.
Even during the pandemic?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think online chess helped me grow from about 1500 to 1800. And that was because I don't even think studying chess is what made me get to 1800. Like all this stuff that I'm talking about right now, that's really what it's taken to get from class A to expert, and hopefully from expert to titled. I don't really like that word. Just say master. From expert to master, which is of course the next goal. I would say the study has been instrumental in going up rating classes now. But to get from 15 to 1800, playing online chess helped. And that was because I was an adult. So I was coming at the game a little differently. I'd studied some advanced math in college. And so I learned to do logic just a little better than I could as a kid. So I kind of figured out that chess is a logical game, and the way to play it is to look at different moves and variations. It sounds so silly, but I mean, as a 1500, I really understand that. So online chess did help me once I had a good framework for looking at the game, and that is a rational one. Playing online chess, it exposed me to a lot of different openings. It exposed me to different situations. I mean, so I think it can be beneficial. Obviously, there's stories in the chess community, and I don't know if they're propagated by Hikaru himself, but he often talks about playing online chess as having been the main tool for him to grow. I don't know how much I believe him, actually, but
yeah, it's hard to believe, but he's been sticking to that story like all along. So
I know. Well, I don't know the guy, so I have no reason to doubt his honesty. But maybe it's a little nonchalant. I don't know.
Yeah, that could be. So what's your approach been to openings, Andrew? Like how much time do you devote to them relative to your more general chess study?
My openings are a serious liability. I'll always be in trouble at this point against a well-prepared opponent. My opening, I'm lucky to get through the opening, right? My future opponents are listening to this and loving it.
Right.
Anyone who's well prepared is going to get me into some trouble.
Yeah. So don't walk into their prep, especially after this interview.
Well, and I play all these mainline openings too, only to make matters worse. I mean, I'll play like the Rui Lopez or what a main line of everything. I'm not married to those lines. I'm willing to deviate. Sometimes I'll start a game with knight f3 or d4 just to feel some variety. So as far as how I study openings, well, the sad thing is that I have studied a lot of openings, but most of what I've studied is like totally irrelevant. So I've studied for the opening I've sunk the most time into, for instance, is the bishop c4 variation of the King's Gambit, the King's Bishop's Gambit. Why did I do that? I rationalized it. I rationalized it by saying I don't want to ever be scared of someone playing, because if you're, let's say, not a master or grandmaster or whatever, if you're unprepared in general, the King's Gambit could be really scary. So I guess that's how I rationalized it. So warning again to all future opponents: if you do play the King's Gambit against me, I think I will be prepared for that.
Nice. So Andrew, you mentioned that you're kind of digging yourself a hole in the opening, and we know you're playing in New York where they have a lot of action chess. So I'm just curious, when you do play these tournaments, what time control are you generally playing? Like, is there action involved, or is it generally slower games?
I'm playing both. I'm playing it's not in the present anymore. It's already more than half a year ago, but maybe I played in February, so half a year ago. I was playing sometimes the Thursday night games, the action at the Marshall. Those are rapid. Those are what would be considered rapid chess.
25-5 or something.
Yeah. But my preference is for the slow games. I enjoy digging into the game and digging myself out of
An opening hole.
My opening knowledge, yeah.
Okay, and just a couple more, Andrew. Do endgames have a special place in your study approach, or it sounds like with the calculation work you're doing, they might just sort of fall under that umbrella? Is that the case, or do you make special time to study endgames?
I take care to look at some endgame studies. I'm not really well versed in theoretical endings, but I think Magnus Carlsen said the same thing, and and I'm I don't know, about 1,000 points weaker than him, so. I really don't know theoretical endings very well, but I do studies. I do endgame studies to improve my calculation, and I know that if we get king, bishop, and knight over the board, I'll probably be able to set checkmate. But
Gotcha.
other than that.
And I'm putting you on the spot, Andrew, but do you have any recommendations for resources for studies? I feel like club level players are always, it's harder to find studies that are not just like too hard, you know?
There's a really great one, and it's again Polgar. So similar, the checkmating book, which isn't all checkmates, by the way, it has other stuff in it, but that checkmating book is the really famous one. But he has a similar book, actually, that's just called Chess Endgames by Polgar. And it's a compilation of something like 4,000 studies. And they start, of course, easy, and he kind of builds gradually. And it's an amazing book. If you're willing, and if you really care about chess, I would assume, you'll budget yourself accordingly. So can spend $100 and get this book, and it's a really wonderful book with a lifetime supply of these studies.
Well, somehow I didn't know about that, and obviously you can't argue with Laszlo Polgar's results. So that's a great recommendation.
To know how to train, yeah. So,
cool. So, Andrew, before we let you go, I just kind of wanted to get a sense of like what's next. Do you have a concrete goal? Like, what do you have planned once we finally get to play chess again?
Yeah,
tournament chess.
So surprisingly, in light of everything I've been saying, I don't plan to stay in the chess Stone Ages. I may be studying. I'm studying a bunch of material from the 1930s now and earlier, but that's really to expand my capacity to play the game, to see the board, as we were saying, to understand it on a basic level. I don't think that my approach or what I'm doing is really a result of ambition. It's not a desire to be contrarian. I'm not trying to be old school for its own sake. I'm doing what I think will best prepare me to continue growing as a player. So eventually, or not even eventually, but in real time, I'm kind of progressing chronologically through chess. So still reading Reti's Masters of the Chessboard collection. There's Alekhine's book. There's Bronstein. And then there's Fischer. And then already you're kind of in modern chess. So obviously a 2,800 rated player would say, well, it's not quite modern 30 years ago. But for any club player, for anyone that would care what I have to say, I would say that's modern enough.
Yeah,
but I do plan to continue improving. I have not been training with the goal of making 2,000. I've been training with the goal of becoming a good player, and my ambitions don't really have a ceiling. But
cool. Well, 2,000 is a good player, I have to say. But
thanks.
But I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't have a limit. I want to pursue a career outside of chess, so that will limit the growth to some extent, but no goal is really too high, and I'm curious to see where things will go.
Awesome. Well, hopefully you can keep it up, and we can check in on you in a few years and see how it's going.
Well, I hope so too. So for that to happen, there'll have to be chess again sometime.
Yeah, That would be nice for reasons beyond chess, but the chess would be a nice bonus.
Yes, it would.
Okay, cool. So Andrew, if anyone would like to ask you any questions or has follow-ups, are you okay? You're not on social media, are you?
No, I decided I could only be on Lee Chess, so I don't have Facebook. And
okay, but you already revealed your Lee Chess handle, so
they're welcome to write me. I'll give my email here. It's okay. It's my last name, which is zinn.andrew.m@gmail.
Okay, yeah, and I'll put a hyperlink into the show description as well. But yeah, thanks and congratulations, Andrew. You're pretty modest about it, but it's not so easy to do what you've done, especially with a lot of other responsibilities. So congratulations and keep up the good work. And thanks for sharing your secrets as promised.
Well, thanks, Ben. And it was an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Special thanks, as always, to my producer, Matthew Passy, and thanks to those who continue to help spread the word about perpetual chess. Positive reviews on podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, glowing comments on YouTube help people discover the show, as does telling a friend or sharing it on social media. Speaking of which, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm @BennyFischel1, or join the Perpetual Chess Facebook group and continue the conversation about the latest interview. Sometimes the guests even weigh into these discussions. The Perpetual Chess Instagram page is back in action, so lots of ways to stay engaged, as they say. But most of all, of course, I want to thank those who provide financial support to the show, especially right now with all this COVID craziness going on in the world. Most of all, I want to thank Chessable for sponsoring the show, and to everyone who kicks in via PayPal or the Perpetual Chess Patreon page. I also just put up a little donate directly link on the Perpetual Chess webpage where it says donate. But again, if you're not in a position to donate, I'm happy to have people listening and just enjoying the show. So without further ado, I'd like to give thanks to the people who help make Perpetual Chess possible. I would like to give thanks to the following people and entities: Chessable.com, Quality Chess Books, the Capital City Chess Club, the Apprend Chess Twitch channel, Andrew Alhaji, Andrew Bach, Austin Clough, Benjamin Porteau, Bill Sigler, Kathy Carr, Chad Oliver, the Chess Central's Chess Blog, Chris Flanagan, Dan O'Hanlon, Danny Davidson, David Schreiber, I am Dimitri Schneider, I am Eric Rosen, Firas Sawaf, Gary Foreman, Greg Harst, Greg Nattel, Greg Shahadi, Guven Manet, James Kennedy, Jens Green, John Jernigan, John Rockefeller, John Cromarty, John MacArthur, Kelly Palmer, Kevin O'Callahan, Lucio Casada Silva, the law offices of Stuart Katz, LeelaAnalysis.com for cloud-based Leela engine analysis, Michael Can, FM Michael Oblin, Mike Zelazny, Mr. Mike Shahadi, the famous Mr. Dodgy, Peter Zodi, Reuben Fisher, Seattle Chess Club, Stephen Martinez, Thomas Stanix, Thomas Tachenko, Todd Bryant of Strong Chess, Todd Kennedy, Wayne Beam, and I also would like to thank the following: Aaron Waffler, Ace Vallega, Adam Ralph of ChessEngland.com, Adrian Gutierrez, Alex Pejas, Andy Ryerson, FM Andrei Terakov, Dr. Andrew Perry, Anita Deer, Barry Hessian, Better Chess Training, Bill Juniper, Bill Moran, Brad and Andy Rosen, Brett Howard Lynn, Brian Mullis, Chad Hilton, Dr. Charles Snodgrass, Chris Wainscott, Christopher Baumgartner, Christopher Chabris, Chris Lott, Christopher Wood. I am Christoph Zalecki, a.k.a. Chess Explained, Coach J's Chess Academy, Costa Carras, Courtney Fry, Craig Mallon, Daniel Ginsberg, Daniel Naylor, Dave Saylor, David Bleskacek, David Cramley of Chessable.com, Dalen Shelton, Dirk Decker, Drake Domingue, Dwayne Edmonds, Ed Daly, Ethan Smith, Ian Mason. I am Elect, Donnie, Ariel, Fox Valley Chess Club, Francis Letarte Lavoie, Frank Tortoris MD, Gary Andrews, Gary Lewis, Geert Vanderveld, Gerard Barta, Giovanni Russo, Hans Schu, Haris Srinivasan, Jacob Kovac, Jacques Perry, James Aspinwall, James Bonastia, James Muir, Jason Woolham, Jaydeep Chakrabarty, Jeff Anderson, Jeffrey Martello, Yep Hoyland, Jerry Wells, Jim Ratliff, JJ Snod, Dr. John Fallon, John Fernandez, John Fontaine, John Hartman, John Jeffrey, John McMurtry, Jonathan Slater, Jordan Goodwin, Jose Rodriguez, Justin Gardner, Jen Shahadi, Joel Rocky, John Thompson, GM Josh Friedel, IM Kari Christensen, WGM Katerina Nemtsova, Kelly Palmer, Kevin Pryor, IM Kostya Kovutsky, Krishna Gopalakrishnan, Kyle McAvoy, Larry Ryforth, Laura Boyowski, Martin Knudsen, Martin Krug, Matthew Passy, Matthew Tedesco of SeattleChessMeetup.org, Mechanics Institute Chess Club of San Francisco, Michael Allard, Michael Hudson, Miguel Arispide, Mike Clem, Mitchell Fabian, Nate Solon, Neil Bruce, Nigmat Mulajanov, Olaf Mueller-Michaels, GM Pascal Charbonneau, Pasi Passanen, Paul Bain, Paul Clarkson, Paul Sweeney, Paulo Santana, Peter Lux, Randy Temple, Ricky Grijalva, Richard Hallenbeck, Robert Turner, Roy Yearwood, Ryan Berg, the Say Chess YouTube channel, Scott Doherty, Scott McKinnon, Sebastian Finsterwater, Shane Unger, Stefan Roller, WGM Tatyev Abrahamian, Tim Brennan, Tim Seymour, Timothy Ha, Tom Edsel, Tomas Komanich, Tony Rotella, Tyrin Price, Vishnu Srikumar, William Brock, William Juniper, William Hogarth, William Peterson, FM Zhao Cheng of Chess1000.com, and last but never least, Zhivko Storyanov. Thanks for listening, everyone. I will catch you all next week.